So my name is Erica Peplinski-Burge. Just to tell you a tiny bit about myself, I spent 18 years in the classroom, started teaching in 2005, and I have taught all grades pre-K through 8th. I was the Michigan World Language Teacher of the Year in 2020. I was very lucky to get that, but I am only telling you that so that you know I have spent a lot of time in the classroom, and the strategies that I'm going to share with you are tried and true strategies for making stories successful with students. I have had thousands of students and have got to experiment with them all, so I'm going to share some of my favorite strategies with you today. These will be demonstrated using Vocez, but you could do most all of these strategies with any stories. They're all here for you right here in the Vocez program, but this is applicable to any story you may want to do with your students. So a story from start to finish. Here we go. And David, you started the recording, is that correct? As we get into this, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and speak up or type it in the chat. I will do my best to keep an eye on both, as will David. And here we go. So today's plan, we're going to talk about what's in a story. We're going to briefly talk about total physical response and how you can integrate that into your stories. We're going to talk about personalized questions and answers, free story activities, story scripts, what to do to warm your students up for the story, what to do during the actual stories, and then post-story activities as well. My dog is barking a lot. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to shut this other door to make sure that you cannot hear the barky dog. Both doors are shut. Let me know if you hear any dog barking, and I will try to make her even quieter. But a squirrel dared to walk near the house, and she is a little angry. Good afternoon. If you want to say hi in the chat, I always like to hear where everyone is from, but we're going to roll right into it as well. So the way I'm going to show you how to do stories is the natural progression of individual words and phrases, sentences and brief interactions, paragraphs and short text, and then longer text and discourse. Oh, I like all the highs in the chat. Thank you. I like to feel like I'm with the group instead of talking to the screen. So this is the way we naturally progress in how we learn a language. It doesn't matter if we're a baby learning our first language or an older person learning their second, third, or fourth language. Our brains acquire languages in the same way. We start with individual words and phrases. We build to sentences and brief interactions, and then paragraphs and shorter text, and finally longer text and discourse. And this is programmed into Vocez. So the way I'm going to show you how we roll everything out is also the natural order of how we acquire languages. Just an interesting tidbit, sentences and brief interactions are where most of our daily interactions occur. And so that is something we emphasize a little bit. All right, here we go. So if you've heard me talk, you've probably heard me talk about the mentalizing system before. I have to at least mention it briefly as we go into stories. I will cover it quickly. We have these two parts of our brain that work kind of on a teeter-totter. They don't work at the same time. They're the prefrontal cortex and the mentalizing system. The prefrontal cortex handles things like logic and reasoning, math problems, like how you're going to fit things into a suitcase, all of those sorts of things. The mentalizing system is the part of our brain that handles our relationships to others, our story, how we see ourselves in the world. Now, the brain is kind of like a muscle in that the parts that we use more become stronger and faster. In fact, our brain can be up to 100 times faster at processing things with enough practice. Now, the scientists wanted to find out which part of our brain we spend the most time in. So which part of our brain are we working out the most, the prefrontal cortex or the mentalizing system? They put participants in a study into a machine and they threw math questions at them something like every 30 seconds. And what they would see was the prefrontal cortex would switch on to solve the math problem, but the second the problem was solved, it would switch off and the people would be back in their mentalizing system, thinking about themselves, their story, their relationship to others. So the scientists hypothesized that the mentalizing system was the stronger part of the brain because they're working it out more. They went a step further and they gave two groups of test subjects a test on an imaginary person. They had to read this page about an imaginary person. Group A was told that they were going to take a test about this imaginary person. And they found that when they were reading about this imaginary person in an fMRI machine, they used their prefrontal cortex to read the information. Group B was told they were going to set up one of their friends on a blind date with this person. Group B in the fMRI machine ended up using the mentalizing system to read about the person. Both groups, Group A and Group B, were given the test about this imaginary person. And which group do you think did better? Prefrontal cortex, Group A, or mentalizing system, Group B? B. B is the correct answer. The mentalizing system, the people who use the part of their brain that's responsible for our story and our relationship to others. It's because they were connecting it to their own relationship, their own past knowledge. And so we can use stories to activate the strongest part of our brain for acquiring language. And that's what we're going to get into now. The mentalizing system is in effect when you're like in the middle of a good book and all of a sudden you look up and it's 4 a.m. If you've ever experienced that, you've been heavily into your mentalizing system, living the story, and we can help our students live the stories too. In fact, I had a third grade student showing her kindergarten brother my classroom, and she goes, here's our toys, and here's our books, and here's our costumes, and we speak in Spanish in here the whole time, but mostly I just forget. And that's because we're playing and we're activating their mentalizing system, and we're using all of these great brain tricks to make the language live for them. So they barely even remember they're in another language. So a great way to begin a new story is with total physical response. And Justin did a whole session on total physical response, so I'm going to cover this very briefly, but you can always go back and watch the recordings from his session if you missed it. But total physical response is just the act of making up an action that goes with the words. In Voces, along with the native speaker audio, we provide some total physical responses for you. You can use the ones provided on the platform, or you can make them up with your students. A lot of the times I'll be like, okay, vuela sobre means fly over. Everyone show me vuela sobre, and I'll look around and be like, oh, that's a good action, and that will be our action. I teach 20 classes at a time, so a lot of the times I just pretend that the students are actually making up the actions and I'm just using the same action for all my classes so my brain doesn't get confused, but it does give them ownership of the actions. So you can do the total physical response, and I would come up with one for each of these. Vuela sobre means flies over, viene is comes, llama a is calls, hace daño is hurts, and espera is waits. So I would have actions for each of those. I would practice with the students. You might just say the words and have them do the action. You might do a game like charades with them. Which one am I doing right now? Please, someone type quickly so I don't have to do it for too long. Which action am I doing right now?
Charades.
Yeah, vuela sobre, and it's charades. I'm doing flies over. So you can play charades with them. You can play Pictionary. You can play Simon Says. So for me, it's Simon dice, Simon Says. And I'll do this in English, but in the classroom, I'd be doing it in Spanish. Simon says, fly over. Simon says, calls. Simon says, does damage. Does damage. And then whoever does the action when I'm not saying Simon says, they're out. I let my students get back in very quickly because the whole point is for them to do the actions, but still, it's a great way to practice the vocabulary in a fun way. And then another one you can do is book it. If you are using Voces, we have vocabulary sets already set up for you, so you don't even have to make it. And Book It is, I'm not going to have time to show you now, but Book It is fabulous because you can play a class game with the vocabulary, or you can set up individual games and just leave the links open on a website, and students can go and click and play on their own. And the individual games are genuinely fun. When I did that for my students and I was in a no homework building, I had 500 students, and I would have students play the game like 500 times a week. So kids were going and playing and getting lots and lots of vocabulary practice on their own. So Book It is another great way to get that extra vocabulary practice in. So after we start with those words, we're going to build up into using them in whole sentences. And you can use those, you can do that with images or drawings or actions in your classroom. Voces provides these beautiful pictures. And so I would tell students, Ooh, el águila, águila, and I have them guess what an águila is and point at the eagle on the page. Vuela sobre, and I would again do that TPI action, el cañón, and I would point at that on the page. For this, it has the English right here, but after a trick I like to use, especially when I'm building up my beginning students, is I'll say it in Spanish and act it out. El águila vuela sobre el cañón. And then I'll point at the words, and my students will say the English. The eagle flies over the canyon right after I've said the Spanish. And again, it kind of just reinforces meaning and make sure that all of your students are in the right place and all of your students are on the same page as you. So you're practicing this vuela sobre, this important vocabulary structure in context. But then you can start to sneak in some of the culture that's going to be coming up in the story, because the story I'm going to be showing you is taking place in Peru. And this is a condor that lives in Peru. And so I would say in Spanish, the condor vuela sobre, flies over Peru. And we would talk about that because you're starting to build into the other culture, and then talk about, what animals fly over here and what animals fly over Peru. So we're kind of starting to build the culture a little bit as well as the language connection. From there, I like to look at maps because I want the students to get a sense of where this story is taking place. Voces provides these beautiful maps of the countries for you that are labeled. I like to, and this is something I learned from Benjamin Tinsley, I like to connect the map to where the students actually live. So I'm in Michigan. This is Peru. We would look at Peru and I would ask students to tell me what they notice about Peru. Like, what are some things that you notice about Peru? Go ahead and tell me. Look at the map. There's no wrong answers here. You're just telling me what you notice. I'm giving you a little second. There's mountains, there's a river, it's long, great answers. I would do the same with students and then tell them, okay, here's Peru and here's Michigan. What's something you see that's the same? They can brainstorm with a partner, they can write it down on whiteboards. What's something you see that's different? Yes, Amy says the shape is similar. That's true. Yes, Michigan is the mitten. That's also true. I would ask them what's something you see that's different. Then, because we've been doing flies over, I might say, what is an animal that flies over Michigan? What's an animal that flies over Michigan? Or where you live? Go ahead and put it in the chat.
Well, eagles. I've seen eagles.
Yeah, eagles, exactly. Deborah, I have eagles that live by me, and every time an eagle flies around, I'm like, oh my gosh, an eagle! And my kids are like, yeah, I've seen it, Mom. They're not nearly as excited as I am about the eagles, but I'm always excited. People are saying vulture and seagulls and all of that in the chat, and those are all great answers. So we're practicing flies over, we're comparing and contrasting where we live, we're starting to get the culture built in and get them ready for the story just by looking at a couple maps. So very low teacher prep, the maps are already there for you if you're using Voces, other than your local map. In Voces, we also have some vocabulary practice built right in. And again, you're seeing we've gone from these individual words to these sentences. And the first one, in case I know we're not all Spanish speakers here, the girl, something, her friend. And here's all these choices. You could certainly go and have your students do this on their own. I like to do it as a class first because it gives the students a chance to get some extra reading in, to get up and move around. Your fast processors, it will be like a game for them and they'll get some more speaking time. And your slower processors, this will really reinforce the words for them and make them feel more confident. So here it says, the girl something to her friend. I would say, okay, if you think the girl waits to her friend is the right answer, go to this side of the room. If you think the girl calls her friend is the right answer, go to this side of the room. And have them actually get up and physically move to one side of the room or the other. And then you can talk about the right answer. And I would proceed that way through all of these. Another alternative is to have students hold up a whiteboard that says the right answer where they write it on there. There's lots of different ways you could do this. My point here is do it as a class first, really quickly, as some sort of low prep game, and then have students go and do it on their own. The fast processors will fly over through it, and then they can go use the game center or book it and get some extensions. The slower processors will feel so much more confident, and you won't be leaving anyone behind. Okay, I heard someone, but I think that was an accidental voice turn on. Some other pre-reading activities for repeated exposure are something along the lines of you just take these pictures up and play the fly swatter game. These are all of our pictures we have in there. And I would give them whole sentences, and you have the students, two teams. Each team has a clean fly swatter. You say a sentence that covers one of these pictures, and the student has to go up and hit the picture that matches their sentence. You could also print these pictures or even just the vocabulary words on a sheet, put them between two students, give each student a pencil, have them use their eraser end, and you say a word, and they have to be the first one to tap the word or tap the picture. Just some extra ways to get extra vocabulary practice in. I wouldn't use all of them with every single story, but you know your students. I would use a variety of them with different stories, depending upon the needs of your student. You could use all of them if you needed to. From there, we get into personal questions and answers, and I'm going to have you answer a few of these in the chat. Personal questions and answers are personalized questions designed to get students talking, so we're building up again to the short interactions, and to help them feel confident with the vocabulary and to build community. So fly over is our target, what we're targeting here. So my first question is, would you rather fly over a jungle or a city? Go ahead and answer in the chat, and I'm going to drink some more coffee. Jungle, jungle, jungle. Very cool. City, city, city. So we've got an even mix here. In my classroom, I would say raise your hand if you'd rather fly over the jungle, and I would go and count those kids, and I'd be like, oh, 23 students prefer to fly over the jungle. And then I would say, raise your hand if you'd rather fly over a city, and I would count those kids and say how many kids would rather fly over a city. And then I might ask a couple kids in each group why. Why do you prefer the city? Why do you prefer the jungle? We're building community. We're getting used to listening to each other. We're practicing those target structures. So kind of all of the important things. And you might be making connections. Oh, Maria says great ideas. Thank you. You might be making connections between two students who never had a connection before. Like maybe I picked jungle and Deborah picked jungle, and we both like jungles, and we never knew we both like jungles, and now we have this connection that we never had before. So this is a really powerful way to build community in class. Here's another favorite one. What would be scary to fly over? What would be scary to fly over? Ooh, a T-Rex. That would be super scary, and that would definitely lead to me talking about Jurassic Park in class, because that's all the rage right now. Laura points out you're practicing numbers, and you can do percentages and fractions, and that is exactly what I do with these, and it's a great way to practice numbers in authentic context. A pterodactyl would also be scary to see fly over. I see we're all stuck in Jurassic Park mode, understandably. So these are things that would be scary to see fly over you. I'm going to just do one more because this is a really great question. If you had superpowers and could fly anywhere, where would you go? And there's no wrong answers. You could even pick made up places here. You'll get to know so much about people with these answers. So where would you go? Ooh, top of Mount Everest. That would be cool. Bali, Spain, Tahiti, your hometown, Greece. These are all great answers. I love traveling, so all of these answers, I'd be like, me too, me too, me too. And then, again, yo también, yo también, yo también. That's a great way to get me too into your vocabulary and to get some rejoinders. Machu Picchu, I've always wanted to go there. Mexico, the Pacific Coast. I love Mexico. I've not been in many years, but I would love to go back. There's so many connections. As you can see, I could just talk to you all about all the places you want to go for the rest of the session, because there's so much great conversation and so many practices, so many chances to practice target vocabulary. And then you can do these questions for all of these. You can come back to these questions. This is just, and we're not going to practice with these. This is another set of questions from that same story that goes with weights. And it's questions like, in what restaurant do you wait a lot? In what restaurant do you wait a little? Do you feel impatient when you wait? So these are all great ways to get students talking, making connections, listening to each other in the target language, building community. It's kind of all the things in one. Ooh, two little pro tips. One of them is I will often use these to collect information about students. Like if you have a student that is, feeling really down and you find and like not tuning into class as much and you find out during these personal questions and answers that they like Darth Vader. Make Darth Vader come up a bunch in class. Make Darth Vader the bad guy in a bunch of stories. Have that student make Darth Vader sound effects, whatever those might be. My little kid, my sons used to go dun 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 dun. They'd walk around the house doing that. They were obsessed with Darth Vader, and have Darth Vader be in your stories for a while. That will bring that kid back in and make them feel seen. So using these to understand your students, but also collecting information to help bring students back in is a great extra use of personal questions answers. And then also with more advanced students, Marta Yedinak a few years ago taught me about clickers, using clickers in the classroom, and they are brilliant. And there's just these little clickers on Amazon that count things that I bought. They're for like $5. And basically, what I would do is anytime a student would say anything in the target language, they would get a click. If they said words I really wanted them to use, like I want, I like, I have, I go, they would get 2 clicks. At the end of class, I would go and I would write however many total clicks they had on the board. This was a grade level competition for me. So I had my second graders who were my year 3 students going against my third graders who were my year 4 students. So the board might say second grade has 2,656 clicks and third grade has 2,891 clicks. A great way to practice numbers in authentic context. And then at the end of the month, whichever group had the most clicks, they would get 15 minutes of outdoor recess, which they loved. No extra work on my part. And then my little trick that I used was that if I heard them speaking Spanish at recess, I would give them 20 clicks towards next month's competition, which resulted in kids running around the playground yelling things like, "Hace frio, profe," or whatever thing they could think of to say in Spanish during recess. So I would trick them into using Spanish during their party for using the most Spanish. This really increased my upper level students. They really wanted to reach for creating longer sentences and adding more when I started doing this because they were like, oh, I want to get those clicks. So this was a great way to push my students to use more of their language. And I was really impressed with what they could do. So we've gone from our individual words and phrases to sentences and brief interactions. And now I'm going to show you how we kind of build into paragraphs and short text, followed by longer text and discourse. So this is a story script. And story scripts, if you have done like traditional TPRS storytelling, these are your ask a story. And basically, it's a shorter, silly story that incorporates the target vocabulary. Now, anywhere where you see blue is a place where students can make up the answers. Anywhere where you see a circle is a place where you could ask questions about the statement so that students can answer them and get some extra repetitions. You could just have students raise their hand and tell you the answer, but you could also do this Mad Lib style where you have students write a name or whatever else it's calling for, and then you just choose one. I'm going to do this in English because we're not all Spanish speakers, but I'm going to kind of show you how this would go in the classroom. There is a person that is named, that is called, type in the text what you think they should be called. There's no wrong answer. No wrong answer. Oh, I love it. Shannon, you won with Darth Vader. And I will usually take a few answers and like pick the one that my students laugh the most at. But Darth Vader was the first answer in the chat and it's brilliant. So I'm going to go with that. Another way you could do it is sometimes I'll take all of my students' answers. Like the person is called Darth Vader, Lupe, Erica, Antonia, but we just call him Bob. So I'll sometimes give all the students answers and just make up a nickname for the character too. There's lots of different ways to do it, but we're going to stick with Darth Vader. So there is a person that is called Darth Vader. Darth Vader has a kite, but it is not a normal kite. It is a kite in the shape of dragon, phoenix, or an enormous mosquito. Which one? Put it in the chat. Shannon wrote, I am calling Darth Vader Bob from now on. I love that. Students will love that too. So our kite is in the shape of an enormous Mosquito. I'm gonna go with the mosquito because I had more mosquito answers. An enormous mosquito. I tengo miedo. I can mosquitoes always get me, so I don't like mosquitoes. Um, Darth Vader, aka Bob, wants to fly the kite. He leaves his house and the kite flies through the air. Darth Vader is very excited. And you could read this to your students, but you could also have them act it out if you want or draw the pictures because I think it would be really funny to see pictures of Darth Vader getting excited about his enormous mosquito kite. That would be a great picture. But there is a problem. The kite flies over Grandma's house, the the gnome's village, or the camp of some young explorers. Which one? The kite flies over the camp. And you can go on. We're not going to do the whole story, but you can see how we go through the whole story. In class, I would have students raise their hand. I might designate our king or queen of the day that gets to pick all the answers. I might have them write their answer on whiteboards and hold it up, and then I would just pick one. Or you could even roll a die and pick the one that matches the die. There's a lot of different ways to do these kind of silly stories. There's no wrong answer. Just get a little variety in there for the sake of your students. And it's a great way to start practicing these target vocabulary in a longer text in a very supported way. Thank you for playing along. I loved your answers. Okay, so now finally we are getting to the actual story. And this story has all of the target structures. It has some of the culture, and it's going to take us somewhere new in our learning. We do in VOCE start each one with the target vocabulary at the very top of the page. It all has native speaker audio. I might, before a story, review all of that before we actually go into it, just to make sure those are all fresh in my students' heads, depending upon how often you have your student. This is the actual story, The Heroes of the Airplane. And this story is about a father and son, and what their work is they fly tourists over the Nazca lines of Peru. And in this story, they see some tourists kind of vandalizing the lines. And I'm gonna, blow the story for you a little bit. They save the day, they call the police, they scare the tourists off, they save the Nazca lines. So it's a very exciting story. I'm gonna be concerned a little bit more with how we tell the story. And there are a few different ways that you could do it. You could, with students who need a lot of support, first read it in Spanish. El padre de Ramón tiene un avión pequeño. And you could act it out as you go so the students understand it. And then point at the words and you read it in English. The father, have the students say the English. The father of Ramon has a small airplane. You do not have to do it that way unless your students really need it. You could just read the story to your students, clarifying things that you think they will need to have clarified. We also have native speaker audio that goes with these stories in VOCEs that can be sped up or slowed down to meet the needs of your students. So you could read them the story in this supported format where you're saying the Spanish and going over the English, but I would only do that if they need it. You don't have to do it that way if they're already up to being able to comprehend the story with all that support. The work we've done before now with the personal questions, answers, and the vocabulary and the shorter story helps prepare them to be ready for the actual story. These are just a few of the pictures. I'm going to go over different ways you can tell the story, but I wanted you to see how cool the pictures are because they are very comic book-like, which is exciting for students. Now, the things that you could do with this story. Sometimes what I do is I act out the story and I tell my students, as we read the story, I want you to do the total physical response words. So they're all just sitting down and I'm saying, El padre de Ramón tiene un avión pequeño. Vuela sobre, that's the kind of fly over. Vuela sobre, that I would have them act it out. Every time I came up to a TPR word, I would do the action and I would have students do the action too. That kind of reinforces the key structures and it makes the story a little bit different. I also like to do, and this is after you told the story the first time, draw and listen. Each student has a whiteboard. They're listening to the story and they're drawing what they hear. That would have been fun to do with that Darth Vader and the kite one. What I do is I will stop every so often. I'm walking around looking at the whiteboards. I'll pick up one with a cool or funny picture and we'll talk about the picture. So it's a reinforcement of the reading they just did. They're getting extra repetitions of the key vocabulary. I will also have student actors. After we've read the story, we read the story again. We have student actors. In this story, someone will be a Ramon, someone will be the dad, someone will be the tourist on the plane. I could have kids who are the tourists who would be the vandals, and you could also have students be like the airplane. Some students really like to be inanimate objects when you're acting out. Like they'll be super excited to be the plane and just stand there going like this the whole story. That way they can be in the story without having to actually speak. So that can be a fun one. If you have students who want to act out the story but they don't want to speak, another fun little trick is you have them stand in front and just move their mouth and you say the words like "Stop, voy a llamar a la policía." So you say the words and the student just moves their mouth. Students think that's hilarious. And it's a super fun way to involve students who aren't quite ready to output. So student actors is another way. You can even do puppets. I've had students make sock puppets and they name the puppets and they give them personalities. And my kids were kindergartners, so I was able to say to them, the sock puppets only speak Spanish. So when you take them home, you can only speak Spanish to them. And they did indeed speak Spanish at home. Many parents told me. High schoolers and older kids probably wouldn't buy into that. But you could have puppets that acted out the story too. These are all just fun variations of getting ways to help students to get into the story. Don't do them all every time, but keep them in your tool bag. So maybe one time you do the TPR version, the next story you do draw and listen, the next story you do student actors, and you can kind of cycle back through them. Great ways to get in the story and it's slight variations without lots of extra teacher prep, which is kind of the key here because teachers have enough to do. Okay, now we're going to go into some of the post-reading activities. Does anyone have any questions on the telling of the stories before I kind of launch into the next big section? I'm going to use this little pause to drink some water.
I had a question. You were mentioning the TPR with the story, like they would do the actions with the TPR every time you came to a word. But like in the story, they had a lot of repetitions of flies, but it wasn't
Mhm.
always flies over. It was flies the airplane or flies with somebody or something along those lines. Would they do the flies every time, or would you want it specifically to vuela sobre? I mean, I don't know.
I would make sure to clarify for that. That's a great question, by the way, that vuela means flies and vuela sobre means flies over. And I would definitely have them doing the vuela over and over because I think that's one they need to hear. You might have it be a little bit different for vuela sobre. You could even come up with like a vuela is this and vuela sobre is vuela sobre is this. So you could come up with a slightly different TPR, but I would definitely reinforce the vuela every time. Great question. Any other questions before we get into the next part? It's hard to know how much wait time to give on the virtual presentations because I know it takes a minute to type. I'm going to keep going, but if a question pops up, I will address it. Post story activities. There are kind of your tried and true post story activities, and these are ones that are already on the Voces platform for you. Cierto falso, true or false, is just simple true or false questions about the story. You could definitely quickly do this as a class game or class activity, just like I was showing before. I would probably tell students, cierto is this side of the room, falso is this side of the room. I'm going to read the statement. You get up and move to the right side of the room. Have them move to the right side of the room. You can count them if you want. If it seems like students are, in debate, you can ask them why they think X, Y, or Z is the right answer. You can even look back at the text and look for proof of your answer if it is needed. But this is a great way, again, to get everyone excited and confident about what they're about to do. You could also give students whiteboards and put them on teams and make this into like a Jeopardy or the unfair game, which we talked about in the game session, which is another one that just will take me too long to talk about. But you can make this true false into a game very, very easily and then have them go and do it on their own. I really like to do that when I can because it just gets them extra reading. Another activity we have is order the story. These are just sentences from the story, and students have to put them in the correct order. Again, you could do that with any story. We already have them done for you in Voces, but you don't have to just do that with Voces stories. You could have them do this, up on the screen all as a group. You could have them, you could take these and cut these sentences out and divide them up between students and have them write out the sentence and draw a picture, and they have to find partners to put the story in the correct order. There's all, or you could have them give them all the sentences and have them cut them out and order the story, or even write the story in the correct order. There's no wrong answers here. I just want you to be aware that there's lots of different activities you could do with this one. And this is kind of a fun one for your upper level students or your students who are ready for a challenge. And this is where they're going to write a travel blog as if they had gone and they had been on the plane when Ramon and his dad took down the Nazca Vandals. So that's kind of a fun one where you could have them act like they were there or live this story. You could have them do this in groups or on their own, just depending upon their ability level and where they're at. Pop-up grammar. Justin did a whole session on grammar, which I'm sure was fabulous. I missed that one. But throughout VOCEs, when we think it's helpful, we have pop-up grammar for students that might help them to kind of comprehend some of the differences they're seeing in the words on the page. I tend to only do this when students ask questions, like they might, like if I asked a student, ¿Tienes un gato? Do you have a cat? And they said, Sí, tienes un gato. Yes, you have a cat. I might say, oh, tienes, I'm so glad you know tienes is have, but tienes is you have, tango is I have. So just little moments of clarity. We have them in there to support you in VOCEs. Use those or not, depending upon the students you have in front of you and the questions they are asking. And this is one of my favorite activities in VOCEs and something I also recommend you do. That story was about the Nazca lines of Peru. In VOCEs, we then use those to kind of explore the culture or the history of other countries further. You can do this on your own if you don't use the VOCEs platform, but basically in that story, they're protecting the Nazca lines in Peru. And this reading is a leveled reader about the Nazca lines in Peru. So there's a version A, there's a version B, and there's a version C. Each one has more information, so it's longer. As I'm sure many of us know, if we go and show students a long text in the target language, a lot of the times they'll be like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't understand that. But if you show them just a little bit of text and then a little more and then a little more, making sure that you're clarifying for them as they go, they often feel really empowered and they're like, I can do this. So that's a great way to build them up in their reading skills. And that's one way I recommend doing these leveled readers. In VOCEs, each section, version A, version B, and version C, comes with some questions that are appropriate for the level that they're on. So you can do it. Here's version A, we do it as a class. Here's version B, we read it as a class, and here's version C, we read it as a class. But you can also print these pages and have version A on its own page, version B on its own page, and version C on its own page, and let students self-scaffold. So you tell them we're all going to read the same topic, but we're going to read it at a level that's just right for us. So pick the one that you think you can actually read, and then you can walk around and help students and support their learning. But it's really, I love doing that because students are really good at picking the level that's just right for them, and that's exciting to see. But what also is exciting for me is when a student who is like a slower processor or not the strongest reader picks the longer one because they're so excited on the topic. And then they are so invested in that reading, and you can support them and make them feel really accomplished. So those are both great ways to use these. Here's version A, and you get to see some pictures of the actual Nazca lines. Here's version B. You can see the questions are a little bit more complicated. They're not multiple choice, and the reading's a little bit longer. And finally, here is version C, the longest reading, more complicated questions. Oh, Maria's had that experience too. I love that, Maria. And the students will feel really, really accomplished if they're able to get through all of these readings. I love these leveled readings. I think they're really empowering for students. After all of this, it's a great time to kind of start to explore these places you've talked about in the stories visually. In VOCEs, we have panoramas built into every chapter. And so I would then look at this panorama. This is just a screenshot, but if you were actually on the platform, you can zoom in or out. You can turn and look around behind you. You can actually move forward or backwards and really get into looking at these beautiful images. I would do a see, I think, I wonder, I see, I think, I wonder, where students fill that out Advanced levels could do it all in the target language. Lower levels could do that in English or a mix of Spanish and English, just depending upon their level. And you can talk about all of the beautiful things you're seeing in these pictures. You can compare and contrast them to what they see when they walk out their door. And or you could also play I Spy with these. I love playing I Spy with students. No teacher prep. I just, in Spanish, because I'm the Spanish teacher, I say veo, veo, I see. They say, que ves? What do you see? And I say, veo algo. And I'll give them the color, and they try and guess the color, what thing I'm seeing. You can also, with more advanced students, play 20 questions, where you pick an item in the screen and they ask you questions um, to try to figure out what the item is. So let me just show you how that goes. You can only ask yes or no questions. I'm going to pick an easy thing, but I'm thinking of something on this picture. You may ask me yes or no questions to guess what it is. Like, what color is it? Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it big? Is it small? Is it alive? Those kind of questions. Is it a person? Linda says, es una persona. And Linda, great guess, but no, it is not a person. Rebecca says, is it red? And Rebecca, I see some red things in the picture. That is another great guess, but no, it is not red. Is it blue? Sandra, it is not red, but it is blue. So you might be onto something. Claudia says, can it move? Yes, it can move. It is not red, it is blue, and it can move. Laura guesses, it is the train. So Laura is correct. Laura would then get to come up and she would get to go next. 20 questions. Veo Veo, I Spy is great for the lower levels. 20 questions is great for the upper levels. When you first start playing with them, it's a great idea to give them some sentence stems and some examples of questions they can ask, but kids will get real good at this really quickly. And again, almost no teacher prep. It's a great thing to do if you have like 5 minutes to end of class and you need to do something. Yay! I always let the person who guesses either go next if they want to go next or pick a volunteer to go next because sometimes they want to guess, but they don't want to actually be the person up there. Now, in VOCEs, we have integrated performance assessments or authentic resources kind of integrated throughout. But once you've done all of this work with the story and the article and the personal questions and answers and the vocabulary, it's a great idea to find an authentic resource if you can to kind of start to get into all of the things that all of the ways they can actually apply their language learning in real life. This just happens to be the IPA or integrated performance assessment that is in this particular unit, but you can go with any sort of authentic resource you find that matches the vocabulary you've seen. Like it might be good to look at a airport schedule or a ticket or something along those lines. Melissa just did a really fabulous session on authentic resources. So if you need some more help coming up with ideas for authentic resources and you missed that session, I highly recommend watching the recording when it's available. So now we're going to get into low prep. Low prep is kind of the thing I always emphasize when I can, but low prep strategies for more story goodness. So what are some other fun things you could do with these stories now that you've done all of the things we've already talked about, or at least a good assortment of them? This one's super fun, and it's called Reader's Theater in Style. And this is something I learned from Craig Shee many, many years ago. And basically, what all I did is I took some different styles of acting and I wrote them on note cards. So for my students, because I was elementary, it was robot style, cowboy style, video game style, lazy style, pirate style, fairy style. You get the picture, whatever style you want. Students take a familiar story that they're going to act out. You could print it for them very easily on Voces, get into groups, and they pick one of these styles. They then act out the story in that style. So they act out the story as if they're robots. They act out the story as if they're fairies. They act out the story as if they're pirates. These can be so hilarious. So they would be acting like they're robots while they're acting out whatever story you just read. Or they're acting like they're wizards while they act out whatever story you just read. My students love, love, love doing this, and I have seen some hilarious, they've done some hilarious ways of acting this out. So highly recommend this one, very low teacher prep, and some of these are so funny that you want to record and post, and students will go back and act them out over and over. Jacqueline says in the chat, since some of our students have never been to an airport, I'd like to print a layout of O'Hare Airport, explain the vocabulary in English. I'm always surprised at how many have heard the terms that have no idea what they mean. Oh, I love that idea. That's a great way to kind of like support their learning. Great tip. Thank you. So this is really fun, very low teacher prep, theater and style. This is, oh, thank you, Maria. Maria says that she likes the ideas. I appreciate that. Sometimes, especially when you're online, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's going well or not. Reader's Theater. This is another super amazing activity that I absolutely love. All the Worlds of Stage is another one to call this. It's by Karen Rowan is where I first learned this. And you take a story the students are familiar with. You break them up so that there's an equal amount of students in each group as there are parts in the story. So with that last story, I probably have Ramon and his dad, and then the vandalizing tourists. So maybe you have 3 students per group. The teacher is going to narrate the story, and the students are going to act out the story as you narrate it all at the same time. As a teacher, I'm walking around and I'm seeing like who hears my words and automatically knows what to do. So I know they're comprehending. And who hears my words and then looks around to see what everyone else is doing, because those kids need extra help. So it's a great way to automatically assess how much of the story your kids understand. And then if you see any groups that are doing absolutely amazing jobs at acting it out, you can feature them and have them come up and act out a part for the class. But this is a great way to get them acting out and reprocessing the story and for you to see where they're at. Another variation of this one that I think I forgot to include in this presentation is called Sleepwalker, and that one was also by Craig Shee. This one is so fun to do. You have students, I like to have my students sit like in a U in class, so we're all like on the same row. Everyone closes their eyes. The teacher reads a story, and they all act out the story at the same time. It is amazing. It's often hilarious. So if you have a class that trusts each other, you can record it and then play the recording for them. So that's yet another repetition of the story. But again, it's a great way for you to see who totally understands what I'm saying and who needs some extra help. Plus, it's very low stress for the students because their eyes are closed so they can't see each other. Okay, this is another favorite, and I'm hoping you'll play along with me because it's a lot more effective if we play along. This is Reader's Theater. It's called Soundstage. I learned this from Christy Placido many years ago at a conference. And basically, you take a story the students know, the teacher reads it, or those days you could even just play the audio, and students just make up the sound effects that are going behind the story. So they're just making sound effects. So if you are feeling brave, and I hope some of you are, because this is way cooler if people participate, go ahead and turn on your audio. I'm going to read this story in English, and then you are just going to make whatever appropriate sound effects you think there might be for the story. There's no wrong answers. Okay, I'm going to start here with the father of Ramon. The father of Ramon flies a plane very low. Perfect, perfect. Ramon yelled, "Enough!
Basta!
Basta, basta.
Basta! I love it. I am going to call the police." When they hear Ramon, the people run to their car and leave, driving very quickly. The father of Ramon flies the plane over the car. Ramon calls the police and describes the car and tells them where they go. After 10 minutes, a police car comes and captures the vandals.
No, that's an ambulance.
The tourists in the plane applaud. Oh, and I applaud all of you. Thank you so much for playing along. This one is so much fun. It's really, really low, obviously low prep for you, low stress for the students. Having the sound effects adds a whole other level that kind of helps you like live the story. After you do this with the class, you can totally print this out and have students go and do this in small groups. You can even have a contest to see which group has the best sound effects. Students will get really, really, really creative with the sound effects, and pretty much everyone feels comfortable making sound effects. So it's a great way to get everyone into, the presentation. So a few more post-story activities. Reading, this is write and discuss. So basically with this one, what you do is it's the day after you've told a story, the students really know it well. You as a teacher, write the story on the board so they have processing time, and you retell the story, but make mistakes in the story. Say the wrong name of the person, or say something happened that, like, so we know it's Ramon, say the person's name is Bob, and have students correct you. So the students are getting the extra reading practice, a little bit of writing practice because they write at the same time as you, and they're listening to correct the teacher. They love to correct the teacher, and so they listen extra attentively if they think you're going to make mistakes that they can correct. So that's, again, another low prep activity that you can get lots of extra input with. Now, you have probably, if you've been at these presentations, heard about the hub quite a bit. If you're already a BOCE subscriber, it's already yours. You can just add it to your title. I think everyone who was here got some free BOCE's access, so you'll be able to add this. We have so many extensions that you can do with stories in the hub. So right here where it says story script extension activities, there's like 10 different things you can do with a story. We have a section that's pictures and 10 different things you can do with pictures. We have a section with frame breaks and games. So when you have been doing things for a while and you need a little bit of, oh, I need to do something a little different, and you've forgotten this presentation, this is a great place to come back to. I'm going to show you just a few of my favorites from here. This one is comic strips. Comic strips are gold. I love doing comic strips with my students. There is this blank comic strip in the Resource Center on all of our titles, but if you are not a BOCES user, you can also just print a blank comic strip. I like to use this in 3 different ways. For my very beginner students, I take the blank comic strip, I write up the story for them, copy that, and then they just read it and draw the pictures. So the writing's all done for them, and they are just drawing the pictures. It's really, really easy for you as a teacher to look at their pictures and see if they understand the story or not. Level 2 of that is that's my beginners. My next level up, I'll write most of the story, but leave out a few important words, probably those target vocabulary words. And then I will give them a word bank, and they'll have to plug the words into the correct places and then draw the story. Level 3 for me is they write the story and they draw the story. And then level 4 is they do the story. This is like for your more advanced students, and they change something in the story. Like they change the main character, they change something big that happened. You can take these and you can just take the student comic strips and put them in a binder, add them to your free voluntary reading library. Students love to read all these variations of this story. They get lots of extra reading that they feel really confident about, and they love seeing everyone's variations. Another great thing to do with these is to send these home and have students retell the story to their parents. Parents love it. They are so impressed. I always write up a little note that says, like, your student is learning Spanish, so please resist the urge to correct them and just compliment them. Please tell me briefly in English what story they told you and write a compliment for them. So the parents in English tell me briefly what the student told them, and then they write a compliment for their student. The students come in glowing because their parents wrote them a compliment, or their guardian, doesn't have to be a parent. And the parents are amazed at how much Spanish the students already know. So it's good PR for you, it's good for the students, it's kind of good all around, and it's extra repetitions of the target language. Megaverse, I already told you about this one. It's where students change the story. This is another super fun one. It's called Backstory. In this one, you take an interesting character from the story, and then students give you information about the character. So what it looks like is they draw the character. So if the character was Ramon, in the middle of a piece of paper, they're going to draw Ramon. And then around him, they're going to write like 5 to 7 sentences about him. For my beginner students, I give them sentence stems like, my name is, I have blank years, I like, I don't like, I go, I am from. If there's something that the students know for sure from the story, like they know Ramon's name, they know he's from Peru, they will plug in that information. If there's something they don't know, they get to make it up. These end up being really fun, lots of repetitions of important vocabulary, target structures, Great to go on those binders for free voluntary reading or to put them up in the hall. And I do let students do like inanimate characters. Like sometimes they would want to do the airplane, might be a character they want to do, or they might want to do the Nazca lines as a character. That is also welcome. My favorite scene, we're getting close to out of time, but this is another fun one, is have students draw and capture their favorite caption, their favorite scene from the story. So whatever they think was the best, they draw a picture and they write the caption. Now it's up to you. If you have more advanced students, you can have them pick their own caption and write it on their own independently and draw their own picture. If you have, more beginner students, you could project the story for them or have them look at the story and they could copy from the story their favorite sentence and then draw their picture. Again, it's just a great way to get some extra repetitions of key parts of the story. One other little resource I want to talk to you about before we go, and again, we have these in Voces already made for you, but you can totally do this on your own if you're not a Voces user, are the exit tickets. Exit tickets are a great way to connect with your introverts, but also just to know how the students did. I have something like, I usually had 800 to 1,000 students, so I could look through these really quickly and see who got the story and who didn't. And on this exit ticket, if you're not a Spanish speaker, it's just their name, how well they understood today, and then they can write here what they understood. Again, they can write in English in my classroom, they can write in a mix of English and Spanish, or they can write in all Spanish, and by reading these, I can see right where the students are at. If they were able to tell me the story correctly in English, that's not nothing, that's something. They understood, that's the beginning of being able to communicate. If they can tell me in a mix of English and Spanish, that's great. They understood the story and they're starting to be able to output the Spanish. If they can tell me in basic Spanish, that's great. That's a whole nother level. And if they can tell me in Spanish with details, then I know they've really got it. With these exit tickets, one of my favorite pro tips is to tell the students on the back, you can tell me anything you want. You will get some silly answers like I like cookie dough ice cream for breakfast, but you will also get some students who tell you really, really deep things that they really needed to tell their teacher, but didn't want to just say to your face, or they didn't want to say in front of the class. This is really great for your introverts. So I always tell my students, tell me anything you want on the back, and I make some real good connections with them and learn some really interesting things. We are down to our last 3 minutes. So I just want to leave you with my favorite quote on education. Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. Thank you so much for all that you are doing and will do in the coming year to, kindle your students' flames. I really appreciate all of you. If you have any questions for me, you can ask them now in the last few minutes before our next session. But you can also email me directly, ericapd@vocesdigital.com, or for more generic Voces information, info@vocesdigital.com. I hope that this session, I know I talked really fast, but I hope this session was helpful for you and that you learned something that is low prep that you can go and do in your classroom as soon as the school year starts. Thank you for all that you do and for being here.